Welcome to this focused edition of The Deep Dive. You might notice things are a bit different today. It's just me. Taking you solo into some, well, really compelling material. Think of it maybe as a more direct line, yeah. A chance for a really concentrated exploration together. And what exactly are we plunging into today? It's the Bhagavad Gita. We're using the source materials we've gathered. Now, you've probably heard of it, right? It's often described as this timeless doctrine, universal truth, a real guidebook, you could say, for navigating life's moral and spiritual paths. And at its heart, it tackles those huge questions, doesn't it? Like, who are we, really? And how can we find, a lasting sense of happiness and peace, especially in a world that often feels, well, pretty chaotic. What always gets me, and hopefully gets you interested too, is just how influential it's been for centuries. We're talking figures who really shaped our world of thinkers, like Thoreau and Emerson, even scientific minds like Einstein and leaders like Gandhi, all drawing something from these ancient verses. That kind of staying power, it tells you there's something profoundly relevant still there, waiting to be unpacked. So our mission for this particular deep dive is to pull out some of those key insights from the Bhagavad Gita naturally. We're going to focus on the core teachings, the ones that offer real value for understanding ourselves and the world around us. Our sources cover a lot of ground. I mean, everything from the nature of the soul, our inner being, to the different paths you can take towards, well, spiritual growth. Just to give you a bit of context, the Bhagavad Gita itself is made up of 18 chapters, about 700 verses. And it's actually part of this massive ancient Indian epic, the Mahabharata, which provides this incredible, really dramatic backdrop for all the teachings. And that's actually where we're going to start our exploration. Right in the thick of that drama, with something called Arjuna's dilemma. So the Bhagavad Gita just throws us straight into this really powerful scene. Right in the opening chapters, picture this. There's a massive war about to kick off, a righteous war it's called. But one of the main warriors, Arjuna, he's suddenly just overwhelmed. He looks out at the opposing army and he sees his own relatives, his teachers, people he cares about. And the thought of the destruction, the killing that's about to happen, it just completely paralyzes him. He can't bring himself to fight. Now, okay, we might not face a literal battlefield with our family lined up opposite us, probably not, but isn't there something universal in that struggle, that feeling? Think about those times in your own life, maybe, where your sense of duty, what you should do, clashes right up against your emotions, maybe a tough ethical call at work, or, navigating a difficult family thing, those moments where you kind of know what the right path might be, but it just tears you up inside. That internal conflict, that's Arjuna's dilemma, just on a huge scale. And it's something I think we can all connect with.
Just to quickly set the scene of the larger story, the Mahabharata, it's basically this conflict between two sets of cousins, the Pandavas and the Kauravas. Duryodhana, who leads the Kauravas, he's driven by greed, basically wants the whole kingdom. Even after, peaceful solutions were suggested.
Even Krishna himself tries to mediate, but nope, war becomes inevitable. The Pandavas feel they've got no choice but to fight for what's rightfully theirs. And it's right there, on the brink of this huge battle, that we find Arjuna totally torn. Torn between his duty as a warrior and his deep compassion, his connection to these people, his sorrow, his confusion. It's so intense that he actually puts down his weapons, refuses to fight. And it's right from this very human moment of crisis that the Gita's core wisdom really starts to unfold. So as Arjuna is wrestling with this, this incredibly intense internal battle, the teachings shift. They go deeper to the fundamental nature of who we are, introducing this really profound idea, like the eternal spirit, sometimes called Atman, or the soul, and how it's distinct, completely separate from our temporary physical body. Our sources really highlight this distinction quite beautifully. Verse 2.1, for instance, it says something like, never was there a time when you or I or these kings didn't exist, and nor will there be a time when we cease to be. Wow, that immediately points to something beyond just our physical selves, doesn't it? And this idea gets expanded in verse 2.13. It talks about the soul passing through different bodies, kind of like how we go through different stages in one life, childhood, adulthood, old age. It's a similar process, just on a larger scale. And verse 2.2 really hammers home the eternal nature of the spirit. It's described as unborn, everlasting, constant, without beginning. It stresses that the spirit doesn't die when the physical body does. There's this really powerful image used in verse 2.22. It talks about the soul shedding old bodies and taking on new ones, just like changing clothes. It's such a vivid way to picture reincarnation, this cycle. And the text really emphasizes how indestructible the spirit is. Verses 2.23 and 2.24. It says, weapons can't cut it, fire can't burn it, water can't wet it, wind can't dry it. It's presented as something truly fundamentally beyond physical harm. So ultimately, understanding the eternal nature of the spirit, the temporary nature of the body, it leads to a crucial point. Verses 2.26 through 2.28 basically say,
We shouldn't grieve excessively over this natural cycle of birth and death because, all beings are unseen before birth, unseen again after death.
They're only visible, manifest in between. So lamenting this natural flow is presented as, well, kind of missing the bigger picture. Okay, so building on this understanding of our eternal core, this idea that we're more than just the body, the Bhagavad Gita then tackles this really critical concept of duty, often called dharma, which is basically, one's righteous duty or purpose in life.
Yeah.
And this is super relevant for Arjuna, right? He's facing what's described as a righteous war. Verses 2.31 and 32 in our source material, they speak directly to Arjuna's duty as a warrior, a kshatriya. They say that for a warrior, there's actually nothing better than fighting a righteous war. It's like an open door to heaven for the fortunate ones. Now, the commentary in our sources clarifies something important here. This isn't about like a religious war against other faiths, not at all. It's framed as a battle against injustice, against evil, even if that evil involves people you know or even love. And it highlights this idea that just standing by, doing nothing when faced with serious wrongdoing, well, that can be seen as indirectly supporting it. Then verse 2.33 points out the downside of not doing your duty, your dharma. It mentions losing your reputation and also accumulating negative karma or sin. Verses 2.34 to 36 kind of elaborate on this. They say people will talk about his disgrace forever. Other great warriors will think he just ran away out of fear. He'll lose respect, face scorn from enemies. It's quite stark. But then verse 2.37 offers the flip side. If Arjuna is killed doing his duty in this righteous war, he attains heaven. And if he wins, well, he gets to enjoy the kingdom on earth. So this leads to the really key instruction in verse 2.38. Engage in your duty, yes, but treat pleasure and pain, gain and loss, victory and defeat. Treat them all with equanimity, with balance. By doing your duty in that balanced frame of mind, the text suggests you won't incur that negative karma. So from this idea of duty, the teachings flow very naturally into the path of Karmayoga, which is presented as the discipline of selfless action, basically acting without being attached to the results, the fruits of your actions. Now think about that. In our world, which is so often hyper-competitive, super goal-oriented, this sounds pretty radical, doesn't it? Verse 2.39 introduces it, saying that by acting with this kind of understanding, you can actually free yourself from the bondage of karma, that whole cycle of action and reaction. And verse 2.4 has this really encouraging point. It emphasizes that in Karma Yoga, no effort is ever wasted, nothing's lost. And even just a little bit of progress on this path can protect you from great fear, like the fear of, well, repeated birth and death. A core principle comes out in verse 2.47. It's a big one. You have a right to perform your prescribed duty, it says, but you're not entitled to the fruits of your actions. The focus should be purely on the action itself, doing it to the best of your ability, without being driven solely by, wanting a specific outcome or reward. As verse 2.48 puts it, perform your duties with your mind fixed on the supreme, abandoning attachment to success or failure. This mental balance, this evenness of mind, whether things go well or badly while you're doing your duty, that is Karma Yoga. Just imagine the stress reduction in your own life. If you could focus purely on the quality of your work, your effort, instead of constantly worrying about the reward, the recognition, the outcome, that shift, it could be incredibly freeing. Interestingly, our source material connects this whole idea of selfless service right back to the act of creation itself. Verse 3.10 mentions how Brahma, the creator, supposedly created humankind along with sacrifice or selfless service, saying that through this cooperation, this giving, you'll flourish and achieve what you need. And then verses 3.2 and 2.1, they emphasize the responsibility of leaders. But really, it applies to anyone in a position of influence, right? The responsibility to set an example by engaging in selfless work. Because whatever great people do, others tend to follow. Verse 3.27 adds another layer here. It suggests that all actions are actually carried out by the forces of material nature, the gunas, which we'll touch on later. And it's only out of delusion, out of ego, that we think, oh, I'm the doer. This ties into an idea from chapter 4, verse 18. It's about seeing inaction in action and action in inaction, which sounds paradoxical, but it points to understanding that you can be an instrument, acting powerfully, but without selfish motives driving you, acting for a higher purpose. So as we go deeper, the Bhagavad Gita really underscores just how important self-knowledge and enlightenment are. They're presented as the real pathway to finding inner peace, lasting peace. Our sources describe the qualities of someone who's actually attained this self-realization, verses 2.55 through 57. They talk about being free from selfish desires, not being shaken up by adversity, not constantly craving pleasure, being free from attachment, fear, and anger, basically having a stable, unwavering intellect. Sounds good, right? But then, on the flip side, verses 2.60 through 63 detail the dangers of letting our senses just run wild, uncontrolled. It explains this chain reaction. Dwelling on sense objects leads to attachment. Attachment breeds desire. And when those desires get blocked or frustrated, anger flares up, which then leads to delusion, confusion, and ultimately the loss of reason, of good judgment. You can see how that cycle plays out. So the text emphasizes that real, genuine peace. It comes through controlling the senses, yes, but also cultivating self-knowledge. Verses 2.64 through 66 and 2.7 through 711 really highlight this. They suggest that without connecting to that inner self, that eternal part of you we talked about, there can't be true understanding, no lasting peace, and therefore no real happiness. Verse 4.34 introduces the importance of seeking this spiritual knowledge from someone who's actually realized the truth, a self-realized teacher or guru, and learning through respect, sincere questions, and service. And verse 4.38 makes this incredibly powerful statement. In this world, there is nothing as purifying as true knowledge of the self. Nothing. Now, woven through all these teachings, duty, action, knowledge is the concept of a supreme being, a divine source, you could say, that underlies everything, all of existence. Chapter 7 and our source material and the chapters after explore this nature of God or the Supreme in more detail. Verse 7.06, for example, introduces the Supreme Being as the origin, the source, and also the dissolution, the endpoint of the entire universe. Everything. Verse 7.07 uses this beautiful image, everything rests upon the Supreme Being, like jewels strung on a thread, holding it all together. Then there's the concept of Maya, often translated as divine energy or maybe illusion. Verses 7.14 and 7.2425 explain how this powerful force Maya can actually obscure the Supreme Being from those who lack true understanding. You can think of Maya as maybe a kind of powerful filter, or like the assumptions we carry about the world, that prevent us from seeing the reality underneath it all. Like a magician using illusions, Maya can cloud our understanding of what's truly real. But interestingly, verse 7.2122 mentions that the Supreme Being actually reciprocates with devotees according to their faith, in whatever form they choose to worship. It's quite accommodating. Verses 9.2324 emphasize that the Supreme Being is the ultimate enjoyer of all sacrifices, the Lord of the universe. Even though people might worship in, let's say, misguided ways, may be unaware of this ultimate reality. But then, verse 9.26 highlights just how accessible the Supreme Being is, through simple, heartfelt devotion, an offering of just a leaf, a flower, a fruit, or even water. If offered with a pure heart, with love, it's accepted. Verse 9.29 stresses the impartiality. There's no one hated, no one favored by the Supreme Being. It's equal for all. And remarkably, verses 9.30 through 1 convey this profound idea that even someone who has acted very wrongly, committed sinful acts, they can still attain spiritual perfection through sincere devotion and a firm resolve to change. It's a message of incredible hope. Chapter 10 goes on to explore how this absolute truth manifests in all sorts of aspects of creation, the sun, the moon, the Vedas, great sages, and so on. Finally, our solo deep dive today touches on understanding the forces that kind of shape our behavior, our tendencies, through the lens of the three modes of material nature, often called the gunas. This is laid out in chapter 14. Verse 14.05 introduces these three gunas: sattva, which is goodness, clarity, illumination; rajas, which is passion, activity, restlessness; and tamas, meaning ignorance, inertia, darkness. And it explains how these fundamental qualities of nature actually bind the eternal soul to the physical body, keeping us caught in the cycle. Verses 14.06 through 14.08 give brief descriptions of each guna's characteristics and effects. Sattva leads to attachment to happiness and knowledge, which sounds good, but it's still an attachment. Rajas is characterized by intense desire, ambition, and strong attachment to the results of actions, always striving. And tamas, well, it's born of ignorance. It leads to delusion, laziness, apathy, indifference, that feeling of being stuck. Verses 14.11 through 13 give more signs so you can kind of recognize which guna might be dominant in your life or in a situation. But importantly, verse 14.2 mentions that it is possible to transcend these modes, to rise above them, and attain liberation or nirvana through devotion. This is really emphasized in verse 14.26. It suggests that by engaging in selfless service with love and unwavering devotion to the Supreme Being, one can actually break free from the influence of these gunas. So, for example, if we recognize maybe a tendency towards tamas in ourselves, feeling lethargic, unmotivated, what practical steps might the Gita suggest? Well, perhaps trying to cultivate more sattva, that quality of clarity and goodness, maybe by focusing on mindful activities, seeking knowledge, engaging in selfless service. Those could be starting points to shift the balance. So as our focused exploration for today wraps up, we've touched on some really fundamental principles within the Bhagavad Gita, deep stuff. We've considered the eternal nature of our true self, the Atman, the significance of acting with selfless intention, Karmayoga, the transformative power of self-knowledge, Jñānayoga, and the inherent accessibility of the divine through devotion, Bhaktiyoga. Even in just this single session, you can see, I hope, how the Bhagavad Gita offers these incredibly profound insights. Insights for navigating the challenges, the complexities of life, and really striving for that inner sense of peace. And maybe just a final thought to leave you with. Thinking about your own life right now, where do you see your battlefield? What are the conflicts, internal or external, that you're facing? How might these ancient teachings, understanding your true nature, acting without attachment, cultivating devotion, how might they offer you a fresh perspective? Maybe just consider one area of your life where you could consciously try to act with a bit more selflessness this week, focusing on the quality of the action itself rather than just the outcome. Or perhaps reflect on which of these paths, knowledge, action, devotion, resonates most deeply with you right now. Where do you feel drawn? This deep dive, even with just me today, it's really only scratching the surface. It's an entry point into this vast ocean of wisdom. So I really encourage you, if this sparked anything, explore the Bhagavad Gita further. Delve into its verses, maybe look at some commentaries, discover what timeless wisdom resonates with you personally. And with that thought, we conclude this deep dive.